Hey everyone, this is Guy Zack Productions from Alternative Combat Wrestling, Next Level Pro Wrestling, and Masters of Ring Entertainment. You are listening to or watching Drinkin at Moe's. Cheers.
All right, everybody. Want to thank Reaper Apparel for having Drinkin at Moe's be a brand ambassador. They encourage everybody to break out of that comfort zone, live their best self, which, hey, that's what got me starting the podcast. But they got great clothing, great apparel, t-shirts, hoodies, beanies, hats, all that good stuff. Be sure, link will be in the description, and use the code Drinkin at Moe's to get 10% off your order. Let's fucking go.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Drinkin at Moe's. Big Mo here, as always. YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, all the good stuff, because it helps with that pain in the ass algorithm they got over there on YouTube. We're most places you can find your podcasts on all the audio platforms. Today, I have with me somebody you might have heard, former guest of mine, Johnny Badger, talking about on his episode. Now I have the man himself, Sound Guy Zack. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Big Mo. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm ready to have some drinks at Moe's.
Ah, yes. I mistakenly already drank mine, but oh well. Yeah, so first thing I start off with everybody with is, and I know this one will go a little differently. What got you started as a fan? And then what got you started, making the leap into how you're involved in the business?
So it's actually a really weird story because I grew up in a very religious household where we weren't allowed to watch wrestling. But for whatever reason, my brother, who's a whole decade older than me, he was able to convince my folks to get the WCW NWO Revenge game. So yeah, at like, I don't know, 6, 7, maybe even younger than that, I started playing that. And for whatever reason, I got drew to Sting. I don't know why.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until it wasn't until 2006 when Sting returned to wrestling in TNA. And that's when I made the leap in hardcore. And so I learned about, Jeff Jarrett, AJ Styles, Jay Lethal. And weekly, I was just watching Impact during that golden era of TNA.
Oh, yeah. Back in definitely the golden years of it, for sure.
Yeah. And so when I was in middle school, I was allowed to watch wrestling at my mom's, but not my dad's. And I think I was 8th grade. My mom got us 4th row seats to a Raw house show.
Okay.
And it just grew from there. I took a short break from it. Then I met someone who works at ACW now. His name is Jacoby Gates. That's his wrestling name. Best friend for 12 years. And 2013, we got into wrestling with Seymour Snot and Gouge Wrestling. But we were like 18, 17, and we didn't have the money to travel and pay for training. And then randomly, 2 years ago, we ran into the 2-6 Wrestling Academy, and based out of Fayetteville, and we've sort of been there ever since.
Nice. I know I kind of had somewhat similar. I'm not super religious, but my parents did raise me in a Catholic household, and they always wanted to go to Mass on Saturdays, which might be dating myself because, I turned 40 as of recording this. Birthday is on Wednesday, but I remember WCW Saturday night, back all the way with, like, you brought up Sting, Surfer Sting, and back in those days, and, WCW at that time was really the only consistently available wrestling product
Mhm.
because WWE was still kind of on the syndication or however the hell you want to say it. And so it was like sometimes I'd catch it, sometimes I wouldn't. But WCW Saturday Night, I always remember just not always vocally saying it because I didn't want to piss off my parents, but I was always like, man, can we just not go to church tonight? I want to watch wrestling.
No, I feel you on that. And it was weird because my cousins were major wrestling fans. So
Same.
whenever I was having that sort of like drought of like wrestling material, they had like a lot of VHS tapes. So the first like actual wrestling event that I watched was WrestleMania 18.
Okay.
So yeah, that big feud with Rock and Hollywood Hogan. That was my first time actually watching like wrestling.
Nice. The first ever pay-per-view that I actually ever saw as it was happening was actually WrestleMania 20.
That's a good one.
That was a good one. Too bad we can't really talk about one of the participants.
Yeah, I know. And that really just goes to show because even to this day, this business is one of a kind to where any shit can happen and could just derail everything.
Oh god. And I can't remember a time, at least in my lifetime, besides maybe that whole steroid scandal way back when I was, that wrestling came that close to just imploding because of one incident.
Yeah, it is, and that's the weird thing about wrestling. It's come close to imploding so many times, whether it be for a big reason or a small reason, or just people just, you know, a lot of people say people have stopped watching because wrestling's not good anymore. It's not really that. It's just the platform has changed.
Yeah, it's definitely gone through its changes. I know. Good Lord. I've been there for all the iterations of Sting, all the iterations of Undertaker, clear back through. Good Lord, before he even went to WWE. So I'm like, I've seen a lot of the changes, definitely.
Yeah. It just really comes down to we live in a day and age where you cannot do what we used to do just because it doesn't make sense. And I mean, everyone knows wrestling is quote unquote fake. I mean, I'll say it's a work. Everyone knows that at this point. So
yeah, no, the way I like to talk about it with people who give me that argument about it being air quotes fake is I like fake because a lot of the stuff is predetermined. Yes.
yeah.
But like some of the or a lot of the damage those guys take in that ring, it's like, yeah, you go in there and you tell me it's fake after that.
Oh yeah, I know. The guy I mentioned earlier, Jacoby, my best friend, uh I was training to be a wrestler before I made the move to like production and everything. And we were doing a mini match with another great wrestler here, Honeycut Hambone Jones, great guy. But we had a miscommunication, and I actually ended up accidentally sending him to the hospital.
Oh.
And I got really bad in my head. And I even took a few months off to try and clear my head. And I just couldn't shake it off. So I was like, all right, I'm moving to production.
Yeah. And you know what? Stuff like that'll do that to people, even if you know deep down that like you did everything you could. When you're involved in an incident like that, that could really shake somebody up.
It really does. I've seen it happen so many times. And everyone was telling me, look, it happens, and I understand that it does happen. I'm not going to knock anybody who goes back out there and keeps doing it, but
Yeah,
just for me, I was like, I don't want to do this, and I don't want something like that happening to me.
and no, most definitely. And you mentioned going into production. Now, I think a lot of people don't really realize what all really goes into the production side of it. What, in your opinion, goes into a good wrestling product from the production side of stuff?
So, I mean, it all starts with the sound, and that's where my moniker Sound Guy Zack came from. Uh, because when I came on, they weren't expecting me to be anything special. I spent a long time going in and out of bands, and so I just bought all my own audio equipment, and everything, microphones, in-ear monitor systems. But whenever I would study wrestling, and especially during that golden era of TNA, Jeff Jarrett is one of my idols, probably my favorite heel wrestler all time. But that's because I saw what he did with TNA, how he took that vision and how he made sure that everything was clean around the edges. So, for example, over at ACW right now, we're just sound. So, my biggest thing is, all right, is my laptop in airplane mode? Am I fading the music in and out, or do I have all my cues written down? Because you go to a lot of these indie shows, and they'll just hire someone random. And I remember my buddy CJ Evans, he took one sound guy, his music, and he was like, no, I'll just use YouTube. The issue was the song had a few F bombs in it, and I had edited those F bombs out for him so he could use that song, and the guy refused to use it. But then there's stuff like I've heard text messages and Facebook notifications come on during a match and whatnot.
Yeah. Yep, I've definitely seen and heard a few of those.
And then we go over to the Next Level Pro Wrestling, which is another promotion that I work for. Tony James, the owner, he invested into my ability and my knowledge, and he gave me a professional lighting budget. And so I probably spent about 3 months locked in this room here, and I had all these lights just like laying on the floor, and I'm blinding myself, like trying to figure out how to program them and everything. And I was able to get it to where, okay, here comes wrestler. I hit one button and the sequence starts. And the lighting can really like set up a wrestler. We had this one guy named Joseph Everhart. Unfortunately, he's out with an injury. But he had this medieval knight gimmick. And what I wanted to do with him, I was like, well, we have to make this somewhat special. So I blackened out the room completely. I gave him new music too. So it had this really like strong intro. And then whenever the beat drops, like these two moving heads would turn on and blinding white would just fall on him. So it really just it can make or break like what you want your first impression to be. And especially in a day and age of social media. Yeah, like back in the day, I've always equated to, wrestling is always about what happens at the end. But if you're trying to get your attention on social media, it's that first 30 seconds, that first impression is
that draws you in, and then hell, maybe you stay for even longer after that. Definitely.
Yep. And then this is where the story got crazy and where I knew I had to go into production. A guy named Jason Standifer, he was the one who took the risk on me the most. And he got me this gig for Masters of Ring Entertainment. Shout out to Miss Bambi, who owns that. She was doing a major show at a baseball stadium. And up until the day, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. And then next thing I knew, I was in a video control room running the video switchboard for the live feed on the big Jumbotron in this huge baseball stadium.
Oh, wow.
And I'm talking like Scarlett Bordeaux's on this show, Teddy Long, Scott Steiner, Penta was on that show.
Oh.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like I had just spent like maybe 6 months working, small venues, Comic-Cons and everything with a $300 PA system. And then next thing I know, I'm walking into a production meeting and WWE Hall of Famer Teddy Long is sitting there and I'm putting in input.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. And it just, knowing the right people and being able to show that you can do a clean show. That's what it is. It doesn't matter how big or small. As long as it's clean, it's good.
Oh, most definitely. And, a lot of what I like, you showed me some stuff of yours, some videos, and it got me thinking, especially the one, I'm spacing off on the guy's name right now and I feel bad for it. But it was like a highlight video for a feud. And it's like, that's kind of a lost art right now, because you think back to, Rock Hogan, or the famous ones I can think of right now are some of those ones for Stone Cold and The Rock, those hype videos that they do that, a lot of people still speak about them today.
Yeah, definitely in the indies, you don't see it that much. And on the low level of independent wrestling, now you go to somewhere like PWF, AML, NWA, you're going to get that stuff. But they have the resources to do it.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the first guy to come on the scene and be like, I'm not just a guy who knows how to run audio, but I can understand like what it takes to sell the product. And that hype package for it was Cade Seidel versus CJ Evans.
Yes,
And
that's who I was thinking of.
And we got 9.4 thousand views out of that, which was crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but it is awesome, but you got to think about, like, once you go into analytics, it's like, okay, some of these views are from Texas, some of them are from Missouri. This isn't hitting our local market. It's good to like show potential sponsors being like, hey, this is how many people you could reach, but you also need to take yourself out of that hype and be like, all right, I need to start hitting the local market.
No, but I can totally understand you. When your show is, local independent wrestling, and it's cool that you're hitting all these other different places, but when it's not in your market that you're based in, I can see how that would be like, okay, I need to figure what do I need to do to get it more here.
Yeah, and I mean, I've just been very blessed to be able to have people to take a risk on me, because I did another hype package before that. It was way shorter, and it was more or less a test run. That one did 1.7 thousand views, which was huge for me. And I don't know. That was the point where I was like, all right, I think I got something. We can start going here. And a lot of it is trial and error. That's the big thing. When you go into something like this, you have to understand that even if you do make a mistake, if it doesn't perform how you want to, it's not going to sink the company. Because, I mean, they're there for the wrestlers. They're not there for Sound Guy Zack. I'm just there to try and put these guys on an even bigger pedestal than they already need.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing that I was thinking about in the same vein of the hype packages and stuff, that, I mean, there's some, it's used somewhat now, but the vignettes, like the old school stuff from like, old school Undertaker, like those are definitely a lost art because you just don't see them as much anymore.
Yep, exactly. I'm actually working on one right now.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm not sure when this will come out, but the show's next month. But we are bringing in Jason Kincaid from the NWA, and he's also been on Evolve. So
okay,
we're really trying to hype that up, and we're gonna do some vignettes with that.
Nice. That's gonna be fun because, like I said, it's kind of a lost art, and pro wrestling in general, not just independent wrestling. You don't see too many people using it. It's like, people think like they don't need to now, when, good Lord, I remember some of the stuff from back in the day. It was like that really, like you mentioned with the Kincaid there, it really builds up anticipation. And, I think, last ones I can really remember, but to be honest, I don't know what it was about them, but I think they ran for too long a period of time. Those ones with Veer Mahan.
Yeah.
Like Veer's coming. I'm like, okay, when? Because it just kept on running for too damn long.
Yeah, I remember that. It became a meme online that they kept hyping it up and nothing was happening.
Oh, yeah. Kind of in the same vein of how long it took for, I actually have the video game AEW's Fight Forever, when it kept on getting delayed, and like, AEW Fight someday.
Yeah, I remember that, which I'm glad they took their time with it. And I like the game as chaotic and as weird as it is. I'm just like, all right, this is something different at least.
Oh, yeah, no, very, very unique. Kind of, reminds me of, No Mercy or WCW NWO Revenge, just with way better graphics. The control scheme is very similar, and hey, I'm liking it so far.
Yeah. But I mean, all this just goes back to like that's the reason like it got delayed. You got to make sure it's clean no matter what the product is.
Yep, no, most definitely. And I get in that vein, I definitely appreciate it maybe taking a little bit longer, because nowadays it's not like it was back in the day where if a game wasn't completed, they didn't release it. Now they're releasing patches for games. And, I guess when it comes to wrestling games, I think people, are very justifiably trying to forget the chaos that was WWE 2K20. So it's like, hey, if a company is trying to get around that chaos, then hey, cool. If you found a way to do it, go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean it's the exact same thing. It's like when they tried to release that game on the Switch, and that was a dumpster fire. And they went back and it's like, all right, we're never going to try that on the Switch again, which is smart. The Switch is a great system, but it doesn't have the processing power for a game that big.
Yeah, and good Lord, I remember clear back to the original PlayStation when it was, I think, the very first SmackDown game, and it was that whole line from that game all the way to 2K23 now, which I do have that one too. But the only game in that entire line that I did not own at any one point was 2K20. I've owned every single one.
I honestly haven't like delved into a wrestling game in a long time, or even really wrestling in general. I watch the pay-per-views now, but and that's one thing about being in production and doing the videos and the program, the lights and everything. I'm always in here doing something if I'm not at my day job. So once I get done, I'm like, I don't really want to watch wrestling right now.
No, I can totally understand that when you're doing so much with it, with production for different things. When you get to actually sit down and watch something, you're kind of like, okay, I want something besides wrestling.
Yeah, and again, that's not a knock at wrestling. It's just like when it becomes your job,
Yeah, no, that's where we both were trying to go with that. When it becomes your job, when you get free time, you want to do something else.
Yeah, but I mean, and my brain never stops. I'll be sitting on the couch with my wife, and then I'll randomly start talking about, oh, I just have a good idea for a storyline. I need to text the booker.
Yeah, I definitely had a little bit of that myself. Some of my friends, the wrestlers here locally, can probably attest to that. I probably shared I don't know how many stories with them.
Oh yeah, it's really worse because I have a very small group of wrestlers that I actually hang out with on a regular basis, and whenever we get together here and we may have a few drinks, that's when the ideas really start flying. And some it's like, all right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to climb a ladder, then you're going to do a Canadian destroyer off that ladder into two tables. It's fun, but
I've actually had something similar where a friend of mine was going to be in this promotion's very first cage match. And I'm like, dude, you know how a lot of cage matches, they'll end by like somebody sneaking over and slamming the door on their head, and then they fall back into the ring. What if instead of falling back, you fall forward on top of the guy that slammed the door on your head? Boom, you're out of the cage, you win the match. And wouldn't you know, that's how it ended.
That's awesome.
I was like, I think my wife was actually watching somebody who was there, had recorded that last little bit of the match. And when I saw that part, I'm like, I told him to do that.
Yeah, I had one of those moments. I pulled a CJ Evans was working Jack Tatum, and they said they were trying to figure out the double down for the match. And so I was like, you should do this. And I pulled up Jeff Jarrett versus Sting from Bound for Glory 2006. And they both went for a crossbody, collided at stomachs, and they both went down. And they ended up doing that. And everyone was like, I haven't seen that in a long time. That's why I pitched it.
Nice. Now, you mentioned some stuff about, when you get free time watching stuff outside of wrestling. But before we go into that, there was, I mentioned at the beginning, a former guest of mine was on a thing and, mentioned something about the sound cutting out or some stuff, Johnny Badger, and all of a sudden, I think that's what he was talking about. But I mean, that was a little while ago that we recorded that. But what the heck happened there? I had to get it from the other side.
So this is where I'm gonna break the fourth wall, and I know all my worker friends are gonna hate me, but I don't try to keep the kayfabe up, but I'm gonna use this platform to put Badger over on this. Literally, all that happened, I think his headphones just died, but he was smart enough to like stay in character and make a workout of that in the moment. Because I didn't even know what was going on. And it was the first time I was ever doing this ACW teardown thing. So first time we just had a major like malfunction, and he just pulled it together and stayed in character. And the reason I want to emphasize that is this is Johnny Badger's first year in pro wrestling.
Okay.
Yeah, first time as a manager or anything, and he is literally the most over heel that we have at ACW. It is crazy. That dude is like on another level. He will send me promos, videos of stuff that I didn't even ask for, stuff that never crossed my mind, and all of it is just pure gold. Like last thing I got from him, he sent me a picture where he has a big umbrella and it's his face, and he's going to start using that at shows now.
Oh man, I gotta see when that happens.
I'll send you the picture of it. It is beautiful, but he just goes out there and he can have that crowd in the palm of his hand. And I attribute it to him being a professional musician and working a lot of like local gigs. But yeah, it's insane. I just recently put out a video from our show last month, and it was the first time I was editing 3 different cameras together. And I was rewatching that footage, and usually he does the whole happy-go-lucky, campy thing, but he crossed the line, got new range, and kind of went sadistic, and it was just beautiful. I was like, dude, you have something.
Okay, I'm gonna have to pause real quick. I'm hearing
Okay.
my dog. All right, got a little interrupted by my crazy ass dogs. I love them to death. They're crazy as hell. Just finished talking about Johnny Badger. Now, before we started recording, wow, I'm a little out of breath from running up there. But we talked about how I recently just got a shelving unit for my birthday for displaying some of my collection.
Yep.
I got the vast majority of it with the figures and Funko Pops and stuff. And you mentioned something with what was it? Jason David Frank. How
Yep.
I mentioned I actually have a Funko Pop signed by him. And you were mentioning the story from a Comic-Con.
Yeah, so with Next Level Pro Wrestling, every year we work Fayetteville Comic Con, Fayetteville, North Carolina. We do it twice a year, once in the springtime, once in the fall. This past one in the spring, back in April, they did a collaboration with let's see, what's the name of them? I'm blanking, but I have the picture right here. And I can share my screen. Oh, never mind. But they came out with this coin, Jason David Frank Power Rangers coin, and it was partnered with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So they were using that to raise money for that cause. And I was able to snag one, and now I take it with me to every show I go to. That's in my bag. As soon as it went on sale, I told the promoters, like, hey, I gotta go. I gotta get one of these commemorative coins.
Oh, nice. I actually met him. Good Lord, it's crazy thinking back on it, but it was literally maybe 2 months before all that happened. Like, he came for a signing at a comic shop here. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, and he did a signing at, like I said, a comic shop. And I didn't even know about it at the time. I was actually at a friend's house watching. I was probably one of the AEW pay-per-views, and he was like, "Hey, you hear Jason David Frank's coming to Omaha? You want to go?" I'm like, yeah. And then we went. I went because I knew how a lot of places are when you have signings, stuff gets marked up. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna buy a Funko Pop, a Green Ranger one now, and take it with me. And that's the way I like doing it. Like, I don't like buying stuff that's already signed. Mm-hmm. I like the story of, I bought this, I took it when I met the guy, and maybe even getting a picture with either myself or them holding it. And I actually have a picture of me with him, of him holding the Funko Pop after he signed it, like those morphin things that they hold up on it. Like, he's holding it like that. Because I like the whole thing of, people talk about certificates of authenticity. I'd be like, here, right there.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally get that. I did the same thing whenever I met Sting in, I want to say, 2016. Big time wrestling, Raleigh, North Carolina, Dorton Arena. A lot of history there for Sting and the Jim Crockett promotion days. Yeah. And at the time, I didn't have a beard, so I painted my face up. I went through a Bojangles drive-through with the Sting face paint on. That was great. And this lady that was working drive-through, she just looked at me and was like, "Sting's at the drive-through." But I went there and I bought I think it's called the Sting Legacy Collection. It came out in '99. Okay. But it's a WCW thing, and it has 6 Sting figures from Surfer Sting all the way up to Chrome Sting.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, and so I got that signed. And this is where the story kind of gets funny, because this seems like a minute detail, but it comes in. My cousins were there too. I was front row. They were probably like 4th row. And the whole time I'm watching the show, I'm just like, I smell coffee for some reason. And I looked down, and coffee had spilled behind me and went under my seat where that signed Sting collection is.
Oh, no.
Yeah, got the box wet. And I was very nice. I was very polite. I turned around, and it was this lady and her kid. I was like, "Excuse me, do you guys know why there's coffee on my figure?" And they're just like, "No one's drinking coffee here." I'm just like, "There's coffee right there." And again, I'm not being confrontational at all, because I'm not a confrontational person. And they're just like, no, no, no. And then some random guy like jumped in and was like, "Hey, look, they said no one's drinking coffee here." And then all of a sudden my cousins stand up and just start, "Hey, what's going on? What's up?" And I don't know if it was because they were there and like they made themselves known, but I just went back to watching the show. I was like, it's fine. The signature didn't get ruined. It's just the little corner has a little bit of water damage. I wasn't going to sell it anyway. But literally 5 minutes later, I looked back. That kid and his mom gone.
Oh, man. I definitely had some interesting interactions with, oh, boy, I'm thinking it was 3 guys that I was wanting to get figures signed by at Sammy Callahan's promotion, Wrestling Revolver. I've been to a handful of their shows, and I had with me Rich Swann, Keith Lee, and Swerve. I had figures for all three of them. And, I bought the package for the meet and greet they have before the show. And I was a little bummed because none of those three were out there for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, son of a bitch. Well, then at the end of the show, I'm like, well, damn it, I got these, and now I'm not getting. Literally turn around and maybe 2 feet behind me, Rich Swann. So I'm like, oh, shit. And then go out to my car, still a little bummed, but I'm like, at least I got one of them. Well, then I see somebody filming what looked like a promo out in the parking lot. And I go a little closer, and it's Swerve filming the promo in the parking lot. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll wait back here. Nicest dude. And then I was like, because he was still teaming with Keith Lee at the time. And I'm like, is Keith Lee, did he leave? He's like, oh, no, he's still in there. So I waited a little while for him, and I ended up getting all three of them signed.
Very nice. Very nice. I got a couple stories. One's really short. The second one is extremely funny, but the first one is I was working WrestleCade as a talent handler. So I was working with Kimberly from WCW.
Oh, okay.
And I was setting up for the event, and wrestlers are starting to come in and whatnot. And I see one of my current favorite wrestlers, Danhausen, walk in.
Oh man, I want to meet him so bad.
So he didn't have a handler. Like, whoever booked him didn't give him anybody to like help him carry his stuff, set up his table or anything. And so Jason Standiford, the guy who again gave me the shot, gave me all the connections, really put a lot of trust in me. He asked Danhausen if he needed any help with anything. He was like, well, I just need to be, I think I'm in the wrong room. I need to go to this room. And he was like, points to me, he's like, he'll show you. And I was like, oh, okay. So next thing I know, I'm escorting Danhausen through this major convention center, and I'm trying not to be the mark, so I'm not really saying anything. And finally get to the room, and I opened the door, and he walked in, and then in the Danhausen voice, he was like, thank you.
Oh my God, that is awesome.
The second story was when I said I met Sting, he wasn't in face paint. So GalaxyCon last year in Raleigh, he was going to be in face paint. So I was like, all right, cool. I bought the package to meet him. The night before GalaxyCon, my boy Jacoby Gates was like, oh, so you bought the package. Did you buy your ticket to GalaxyCon? I didn't. They were all sold out. So
oh no.
I spent $150 to meet Sting and didn't get to meet him because my dumb ass did not buy a ticket.
Oh no.
I guess I just assumed it was like, hey, you buy a package, you get admission. I don't know.
I would have thought that myself.
Yeah. So that one is one that the boys still make fun of me of.
Oh boy, yeah, I can imagine. I know. Oh, they just started to. Well, this year is going to be the return of the Comic Con, and they for the past few years that they actually did it, they always brought in at least one wrestler, and they have one of the local promotions do some mini shows there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just the end of this month, actually, as of recording this, they are actually bringing in Rikishi.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I found, and the figure that I found, it was actually at a local Target, somewhat meaningful for me because it was of his head shrinkers persona.
Mm-hmm.
And the head shrinkers were actually in my first ever live wrestling show I ever went to. Them versus Owen Hart and Coco Beware.
I love Coco. I love Coco.
And my dad had actually got us floor seats, and we were like pretty close to the entrance. So I'm like running over every time. And I think it was like in third grade at the time. And I actually talked with a member of the NOI family. I was telling him, I don't know if it was just, the silly third grader in me finding this funny at the time, but I forget which one of them it was, but one of them was in the corner, picks his nose, and then eats it.
Oh God.
And I was just like, what the heck happened there? Why is he eating his booger?
Hey man, you'll see some weird shit in like locker rooms.
Oh God. Oh boy. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to meet some relatively big names. I got invited to Warrior Wrestling when they went to St. Louis, and I regret not getting the figure of him beforehand, but I have one now. Now, Bronson Reed, he was there that night going up against Jeff Cobb. I got to meet them both. I actually have a figure signed by Jeff Cobb. And what was it? I actually got to record a short version of the podcast with Bronson Reed.
Very nice.
It was pretty epic. And I was sitting close enough during their match that when they would chop each other, they chopped each other so hard I could literally see individual beads of sweat just flying off of them. It was epic.
Yeah, the owner of the 2-6 Wrestling Academy and Next Level Pro Wrestling, Hang Time, he has some mean chops just like that. Every time I watch him work, like if you're getting a chop from him, he's gonna make it count. And my best buddy, Jacoby Gates, he got a chop from him, and we just saw like the sweat like fire off of his chest. And it was funny. It was funny.
Oh, I can imagine. I remember a local guy one time drunkenly challenged me to chop him. And then I guess he didn't think I was going to hit him that hard. But I literally wrenched back and wham. And he was like, motherfucker. they were holding him back. And I was just standing there laughing my ass off.
Yeah, my first chop came from a Seymour Snot. And I remember, I was like 18 at the time, and I didn't want to like sit in the suspense and wait for my chops. I just walked in. I was like, look, I just want to go through my chops today. So he said, all right, yeah, we'll do that. So he just he grabs me, he takes my shirt, puts it over my head, and just like slams me back. And so I can't see anything. So I can't see the chops even coming, which I think honestly made it better.
Yeah, because I can imagine the anticipation of seeing them wrench back. You're kind of like tensing up, like. Yep. But then if you don't see it coming, you can't tense up. So it's kind of like, I don't know the logistics behind it, but I can see it being better when you don't see it coming.
Well, I mean, that's everything in wrestling. Like they tell you, like, don't hold your breath when you bump. Don't hold your breath when you fucking take a chop, because it makes it hurt even more. Yeah. So you got to get past that.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Now, I have two categories that I kind of like to round off stuff with.
Okay.
And one's a bit of a name game where I try to theme it towards the guests as much as possible. And these guys each have, in one way or another, with like hype packages or going out on their own production, they all have different ways of being tied into production.
Okay.
First one, a guy that's actually going to be in Omaha here in a couple months. A guy that I like to think was the epitome of getting yourself over when the guys in charge aren't wanting to notice you. Matt Cardona.
Yeah, so Matt Cardona, and the reason that he really took off, he understood what social media was at the time, because when he did the whole internet title thing, YouTube and social media, it was a completely different beast. It was kind of the Wild West at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember it's like he would do these little skits, like the one where he was climbing the fence and his cameraman asked him, "What are you doing?" "I'm trying to get over, brother."
Yeah.
But it's like you think of Matt Cardona, and like a lot of people have tried to replicate that because it worked. And the only person I think that's actually done that successfully is Danhausen.
You know what? Now that I think about it, yeah. Yeah, they definitely done that. I mean, not so much on a wrestling aspect with this other guy I was thinking about, but damn it, Ethan Page with his toy hunt vlogs in a sense, because he's done the toy hunts and the backstage vlogs, he's getting himself out there more. So I mean, but Danhausen, yeah, right there on that level with
Cardona, but now Matt Cardona's done something completely different where he still does his vlogs, but instead of like making his content to get himself over, has taken his character and he's gone from being the happy-go-lucky guy to now just being this badass who beat Nick Gage for the GCW championship. So now he doesn't have, in my opinion, he doesn't need to do the vlogs or anything because everyone's already following him as he's going.
No, most definitely. Now, this next guy has done a lot of great work with YouTube and Twitch and very much on the social media side of stuff, but Xavier Woods.
So Xavier Woods, he just really understands like the market for nerd culture and everything. And that's just because, he's born into it. And that's what it really takes. It's like, let's say we have someone like Roman Reigns try to do that. It wouldn't work because I don't think he understands that culture the way Xavier does. And I also think it helps that, Xavier's just one of those guys, like if you give him anything to do, he's going to do it. Because when he was Austin Creed in TNA, he got that over, which was just the biggest ripoff gimmick that I've ever seen in my life.
Yes. Oh, God, yeah.
But, he's got up, up, down, down. And that in itself is a whole nother entity. And like whenever WWE was going through, it's like Twitch bans, you can't have this, that, and the other. Up, up, down, down stayed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a testament not only to his brain, but I really think his personality. He's got a great personality for social media because whenever he talks, you just kind of feel like, oh, I kind of know this person. He's just so kind of warm and inviting.
Oh, yeah. No, most definitely. Now, next up, a guy that definitely has, his podcast. He's had, vlogs and that sort of thing, but Matt Hardy.
So I live in Cameron, North Carolina. I'm from Cameron, North Carolina. That was always something when I was training to be a wrestler that I wanted to hear over the loudspeaker, just to be like, yeah, Cameron, baby. But yeah, I like what he's doing on social media, and a lot of it's more or less his wife taking the helms of it, and
yes,
which that's completely fine. But the whole Matt Hardy brand, I think, is really good for him because he's gone through so many gimmick changes, and the only one that he never got over was his first TNA gimmick, which wasn't even really a gimmick.
Yeah,
but no, I really like he got. And that's the thing, he couldn't do it in WWE, but AEW, they give him the creative freedom to do it. And I really like that he just goes on there and he just tells it how it is. Because, a lot of these fans, that's all they want. They don't want to be pretend to like, oh, yeah, I hate this person in real life. I mean, it's a business. Everyone knows that. And WWE blew the lid off of that in what, 97, 98? So.
Oh, yeah. And last but not least for this category, mentioned vignettes and stuff being kind of a lost art. And, you go back, we've actually talked about him a little bit, but some of the most classic vignettes back in the day, The Undertaker.
Yes, 100%. The first one that comes to mind was the one in 2012. I can't remember the exact date, but it was when they kept teasing that one date, but they didn't show if it was Undertaker. They just showed it was the trench coat, and there was a lot of rumors that it was going to be Sting. And
I do remember that.
And God, I wanted that so bad. I wanted that so bad because that's my favorite wrestler of all time. And I loved what it ended up being because Undertaker Triple H, I thought the match was great. I didn't like that they did a part two because you didn't have that build that you originally had, where you had the walk in, you had a Johnny Cash singing "There Ain't No Man That Can Hold My Body Down."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all just done perfectly. But that's the big thing about the vignettes, because a lot of people, if I ask them, it's like, why did that work? They'll throw out 100 different reasons, and I have one. It's because less is more.
Yeah. Nope, I can agree with that.
If you that was the thing that the point of the vignette is to let things marinate and to get your brain going, to be like, what's this, what's that, start speculating, and that's what creates a hype train. And
Yeah.
that's what they did. That's where the whole rumor mill of possibly Sting coming in finally is going to be Sting versus Undertaker.
Yeah, because didn't they, if I remember that package right, they had, it was like a cabin, but then and like the night and the rain, going back to some of those early Crow Sting ones where it was the rain and
Mm-hmm.
the trench coat, where it was like, it could be.
Yeah. And on a side note, I know they're not watching, but Vince, hey, I just want to say, WrestleMania 31, you had Sting and Undertaker in the same building. Like, come on, man.
Yep, nope, I'm right there with you on that one. It was like, oh, so close to getting that one happen.
No, but yeah, I really like what Sting's doing. Going out on his own terms, and the fact that he's 65 doing what he's doing is just crazy.
Oh God, some of the stuff that he is pulling off right now at his age is like, good grief. Like the career that man has had, he does not have to go out and do that, but he's still doing it because he just loves doing it. That's just amazing.
Yeah, and that is one thing because I can relate to like Ric Flair wanting to have that last match, or Hulk Hogan or Sting, all these guys wanting to come back, and I've seen it with young guys too. It's like you get out, and even me, because I have burnout too, and I want to get out, but that itch. There's just something about it itch, even from a production standpoint.
Oh yeah.
Like you do the hype package, or you do a certain music cue and the crowd reacts to it, or your crowd gets bigger from the package, you're just like, okay, this is what makes it special.
Oh yeah. No, most definitely. And you bring up that itch before we go on to the next category. That itch. I actually got the opportunity one time to be the special guest ring announcer for a friend's match up in Fargo. And I'm like, when he asked me, I'm like, I get to be in the ring with a microphone? Hell yes. And like, I got a whole entrance and stuff, and I'm like behind the curtain before everything, and I'm like, somebody came up and asked me how I was doing because I was pacing back and forth behind the curtain, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then once they announced me, it was like, boom. I'm like, dude, this is awesome.
So I got one that could top that. I say I live in Cameron. So ACW, we were working the Moore County Fairgrounds, the fair itself. The main event on night 2 was CJ Evans versus first name Sham, last name Payne. One of Matt Hardy's best friends, Omega Wrestling Original. He was The Rock's manager for a while. I don't think manager is the right word. Assistant. Sorry. And so he wasn't sure if this was going to be his last match or not, because he was dealing with some injuries. But I walk around the corner to make sure that these guys are ready to go. And next thing I know, I see Matt Hardy there talking to Champagne. And my wife's usually the ring announcer, but I was doing it just for this show. And so I get in the ring to do the big match introductions with both competitors already in the ring. And I look down in the front row. There's Matt Hardy. There's Rebby. There's all the kids, and I'm just sitting there, kind of like shitting my pants, like, okay.
Yeah. Oh my God, I can only imagine. And I mean, for me, in my one, I mean, you bring up Matt Hardy and Rebby being there before she got to WWE and, now AEW. The now Ruby Soho was in one of the matches that night before mine. And so she was there. And Warhorse, early in his career, when he was part of I believe it was the Viking War Party, they were there that night. And it was just like, holy crap.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Fayetteville Comic-Con, they bring in wrestlers, and my wife, she had one match. She did a good match. It was the intergender match with Hang Time from the 2-6 Wrestling Academy. And at the end of the match, Victoria ran into the ring.
Ooh.
Yeah, right. She wasn't part of the match. This is after my wife had won. She ran into the ring and held my wife's arm up in the air for victory. And then, like, my wife started to get out, and she was like, "No, get back in here." And then she looks down at that hang time and is like, "All right, you're getting ready to take this," and then just fucking knocks him again. And I'm just looking there. I'm like, that's my wife in there with like WWE and TNA superstar Victoria.
That's pretty wild.
And then the day before, we had another female, CC Young, and during her 3 count, like, there was 2 ref bumps, and no one in the locker room knew this was going to happen. Here comes Earl Hebner from his table, and he just counts the 3 for her in her debut match.
My, that is wild! Wow.
And that's the beautiful thing about this business. Like, literally anything can happen.
Definitely. Wow, that is awesome. Now, next category, I have some kind of random questions. Some might be wrestling related, some might not be. You just give me the first thought that pops into your head.
Okay, no problem.
First one, craziest wrestling moment that you've witnessed?
In person or on TV?
In person, preferably.
Okay, in person. So let's see. So one of my first shows that I did with ACW, it was CJ Evans versus our late friend Mark Hazard, and they were doing a street fight for the world title, and they set up TV, like, pretty much the exact same size as the one I have here in the background. They set it up in the corner, wedged it in between the turnbuckles, and then CJ just took Mark and just like threw him head first into the TV, and Mark just ate it.
Ooh.
Like, yep, and he's laying on the ground, and then CJ takes this TV again and just starts hammering on him with it. And then it just got crazier from there, because it's like, we talk about the thumbtacks, but they did the Lego spot. And again, Mark just got hit, ran his head into a TV without pulling back at all. And then he does the Lego spot. And for me personally, that was just a crazy one to watch.
Oh, I can imagine. I know I've witnessed a few crazy ones myself. The ones that I always seem to be able to recall easiest was the guy that I actually had be the best man at my wedding, was in this promotion's version of their version of the Money in the Bank ladder match. They had a ladder bridge between the guardrail and the ring apron, and I see him with somebody on his back on the ring apron with like I'm trying to remember the Sheamus and the White Noise, that were like the heads down here, and I see him look down at the ladder. I'm on the opposite side of the ring, and I'm like, no. Jumps, ladder folds, and I'm like, God damn.
Yeah.
And then you bring up thumbtacks. My first ever, what I call, air quotes, legit death match, and not like a hardcore match that's just, title death match. But it was Jake Chris versus Joel Bateman at Sami Callahan's promotion, and they had just had the match before was a Monsters Ball match. So there's all sorts of shit already throughout the ring.
Yeah.
They're getting ready to clean it up. Jake Chris rolls in, so that, leave it, let's go. There's thumbtacks, all sorts of shit all throughout the ring. Each of them thumbtacks all over the place, and it ends by 4 folding chairs, and they bridge 2 panes of glass on there, and I see Bobby Olson. I've actually had him on too. I see him roll into the ring. He's with Jake Chris. I see him pull out something and lighter fluid. They light the glass on fire and just nuts.
That's a saying. The only other crazy thing that I saw was at WrestleCade, George South versus Nick Gage.
Ooh, I've wanted to see a Nick Gage match live so bad.
Yeah, that was the perk of working WrestleCade as a handler, is you got into all the shows for free.
Nice.
But
go ahead.
I know I was getting ready to say, watching the NWA legend, the old school guy, George South laying in the corner with like 5 light tubes laying on him, Nick Gage setting up for a spot. And then you just see this guy like pop up, and I never would have thought I'd seen him in a death match.
Yeah. The thing I always think about with the Nick Gage matches, it is like from the moment his music hits before he comes out, it always looks like a goddamn mosh pit every freaking time. And I'm like, I see that on like Fight or whatever, and I'm like, God damn, I want to be there.
It's crazy. It really is crazy. I wasn't a part of the mosh pit. I was standing on a chair up against the wall in the back. I was kind of done people in for the weekend, but yeah, just the ovation that he got. And it wasn't even GCW. It was a local promotion, AML, that was just hosting a GCW title match.
Nice. I think I've actually had a few people involved with them on the podcast before, so unless I'm mistaken, I'm very familiar with AML.
Yeah.
Now, non-wrestling related question. I normally ask favorite of this, but I figured, you know what, why not just switch it up a little bit? Least favorite food.
Let me think about that. It has to be tomatoes.
Okay. I can understand that, because I don't know what it is, but like I see people putting tomatoes on burgers and I'm like, okay, fine. But like whenever I'm getting one, I'm like, for some reason, I just don't want the tomato on the damn burger.
Oh no, like it's really bad. Like my wife's talking about buying a food emulsifier for spaghetti sauce. That way I'm not just like scraping little chunks of tomato out of it. I really can't explain it, because I mean, I love ketchup, I love marinara sauce, I love pizza sauce, but tomato in its raw form, I can't stand it.
Oh no, I can understand in a way. Like I can tolerate them, but for some reason, more so the raw stuff, like I just can't. When it's cooked up in like you said, like a pizza sauce, marinara sauce for like spaghetti or lasagna or something, it's like I can tolerate that, but like the raw stuff, for some reason, I just can't do.
Right.
Now, I think we might have already talked about this a little bit, but first ever wrestling show that you attended?
The one I attended, let me think. That's going to be Power Pro Wrestling. So Sanford, North Carolina, which is like 15 minutes north of Cameron. They used to run it out of an old movie theater. Ooh. So yeah, they had all the chairs and they had the ring set up at the front, right in front of the big screen. And it was amazing from a production standpoint. And I always think back to that because it looks so clean. But yeah, it was kind of funny. That company, they had a parody gimmicks. So instead of Mick Foley, the owner of the promotion was Dick Foley. Very nice guy, extremely nice. Instead of the Dudleys, they had the Dudleys.
Okay.
And instead of a Junkyard Dog, they had Scrapyard Dog, who just recently passed away, unfortunately. But these guys were kind of big in the scene of the Carolinas wrestling, especially back in the day. Power Pro was like one of the juggernauts in the area. Gotcha. Eventually, they sort of went under, and years later, now we have AML, PWF, and just sort of independent wrestling is just kind of blossoming. And most of that's just social media.
Oh, most definitely. I love that independent wrestling has blossomed, because I remember growing up, and good Lord, I don't think I attended an independent wrestling show until I was stationed in San Diego and just happened to Google pro wrestling in San Diego. The show popped up and I'm like, well, I don't have to be on base tonight. So I went.
Yeah, I was just lucky enough that in my small redneck town, that's where the independent promotion was. And like so many guys that I work with today, like Cade Seidel, who was part of the Hype Package, I remember watching him when I was like in the 8th grade. He was at Power Pro.
Okay, cool. Now, I would feel weird not having this question in here with the name of a show like Drinkin' at Moe's. Favorite drink, whether it be alcoholic, non, or you could name one of each if you want.
It's just beer.
Okay, I'm more of a beer guy myself.
I got into home brewing there for a little bit. The first beer that I ever made, it was a brown ale, and I was a big hiker at the time, so I called it a trail ale.
Okay, I can see it. All right.
And yeah, and it's mainly because I always see drinking more as a marathon rather than a sprint. And so whenever, I'm in a social situation, there's a lot of talking. So yeah, I want something that I can sip on constantly. I'm not going to be hammered in the first hour.
Yeah, no, that's always good, because you don't want to be that one guy that, throughout the night, all of a sudden you see him just, yeah. And I mean, I speak from experience because I've been that guy before.
Oh, I mean, everyone's been that guy at one point or another.
Yeah, I definitely had my share of that time on deployment. Good God, I that could be a whole nother podcast, me explaining some of those stories. Now, last but not least, best advice for anybody wanting to get into wrestling production, because people don't often think that there's more than just wrestling jobs in professional wrestling. There's production, there's all sorts of stuff.
So whether it be production or just getting into wrestling period, my biggest piece of advice is stay humble. And that's something that everyone struggles with, even myself, because this business is nothing but egos a lot of the time. And
Yeah.
And that's not a knock, because it's show business. And of course, in this world, it's like in my state of North Carolina, there's countless numbers of indie promotions. So, and I don't know, maybe like 5% of guys get called up to like WWE. But now we have AEW, which is kind of helping things out. But if you stay humble and you put in the work, you can put in the work, but just be a piece of shit. And a lot of promoters are going to remember that.
Yeah.
And
no,
yeah, that's it.
No, then it can be a bit of a struggle for a lot of people, because you start getting that hype behind you, and it builds up that ego, and you start maybe thinking a little more of yourself than what you probably should be. And
yeah, no, I've absolutely have had to knock myself down a couple pegs in order to be able to continue doing what I'm doing. Because I mean, if you get sucked into the hype, you're not going to keep pushing to do better.
No, most definitely. You never want to end up being complacent, because when you start getting complacent, that's when you start, all the stuff that you were, working hard on, you start slacking on it, and then it's, things start going downhill from that point.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would say is you need to decide, do you want this as a career or do you want this as a hobby? There's nothing wrong with having it as a hobby, because for me, it's a hobby. If I had an opportunity to go somewhere with it, trust me, I would. But you need to take care of your personal life first and understand that no matter what you do, wrestling isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And right now, if I ever get to the point where I can, do, the podcast stuff and do interviews for different things full time, I would take it in a heartbeat. But you know what? Right now, it's kind of that thing I like to do in my spare time that, you know, I get to have fun because I sure as hell enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Once wrestling stops becoming fun, you need to figure out like where you want to go with it.
Yep, most definitely. Now, before we go, where can people find Sound Guy Zack on social media? So if they want to get their eyes on some of those hype packages and stuff you're working on for, you know, ACW, they can go ahead and get them there.
So a couple places is just my Facebook page, Sound Guy Zack Productions. I'm not very active on it. I only post when I feel like I have something that I've done different. So I'm not just posting like all these little promos where I just add two fades and a logo because that would get overbearing. Uh, but if you also follow Alternative Combat Wrestling, which is where Badger is, everything that's on their page, that's my handling.
All right. I'll definitely get all that in the description. My dogs are looking at me like they're about ready to need some attention. So I better get going. But thank you for taking the time to talk to me tonight. And best of luck out there with Sound Guy Zack Productions and the ACW.
Thank you, sir.